Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong friend John Curran. We're here to discuss the 48 Laws of Power written by Robert Greene, and today we're covering Law 4. Always say less than necessary. When you're trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear, and the less in control. Even if you're saying something banal, it may seem original if you make it vague, open-ended, and even Sphinx-like. I guess you're going to be like the Egyptian lion god, right? Is that what it is?
Without a
Powerful,
nose.
right? Powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. The more you say, the more likely you are to say something foolish.
Well,
That's
I'm a great example of that because I tend to talk a lot and I always say things that are foolish. Um, I'm trying to change my ways with that, uh, and I really do feel that you should always say less than necessary. Silence can be extremely uncomfortable, and as I was writing some notes down about uh, about this law and about this episode, I thought maybe we could just be silent. That would add to our mystery. Uh,
well, if I would have thought about it, I would have had the cricket sound effect going so we could just stand there and look at each other. That would have been awesome.
once you say words, you cannot take them back. We've all said things that we regret in life. Um, I think when I was preparing for this episode, I thought about my 8-year-old, and she knows no strangers. After about 5 minutes, that person knows every aspect of her life and her sister's life, much to um, her older sister's chagrin. In fact, they had a discussion today about why Anna was telling everybody about you know about her sister's life. She didn't want people to know. I don't think it was any. When you're that age, you don't really have a lot of dirt, so it wasn't
It's funny.
anything bad.
I believe I am a master of this law. I don't speak a lot. You know, a lot of people will say I'm quiet, but when my daughter and my wife will ask me a question, often I leave a silence, almost like a nice long pause to kind of get them on the edge of their seat before I answer, and it drives them nuts. They hate it. They go, "Why does he always do that? When I ask Daddy a question, he doesn't answer me. He just kind of looks at me, and before he ever says anything." But it's a great technique. It works.
Yeah, it adds mystery, and I think it also we communicate in many different ways. We have body language. Um, we have a stern look. We have our poker face. Um, just we leave people with a different impression. I mean, I've noticed too that you cannot judge a book by its cover. Some of the meanest looking people are some of the nicest people I've ever met. But if you would see them like walking on the street late at night, you just run. But they could be the nicest person, but you're left with this impression based on their appearance. Uh, and they might even just say hello, and you could be intimidated. Um,
You know, a good technique that I like to use, and when I always say less, I always give a nice sigh, like a that seems to work and get my wife and daughter really churned up before I answer them.
so you're saying you like to push buttons.
Yes, works excellent.
With the last episode, I felt like maybe some of the people that I work with currently shouldn't listen to that episode. But I think for this episode, maybe your wife and daughter maybe should not listen to this. You should steer them clear from from Law 4. Give away your secrets.
I don't think they listen to any of my stuff. They hear enough of my ramblings.
Uh, what about people like me, Tom, who talk too much? Now, how can you reverse that? You have some words of wisdom for me?
You give them a microphone and have them do a monologue. See, you're the perfect, because I do not speak a lot. I rather come in here and there, and so it's easy. It's great for me when you speak a lot. I can check my notes. I can make sure I'm recording properly. So I guess it could be good points and bad points.
Yeah, I was thinking about how using few words and using silence can actually work against you. And I know that when I'm talking to my boss, I need to balance that. I shouldn't say too much, but I certainly should not say too little, because when you say too little, you leave the other person to fill in the blanks. So
well, let me give you. Can I give you the official reversal that I've copied out of Robert Greene's book, because he actually addresses this. He says there's times it's unwise to be silent. Silence can arouse suspicion or even insecurity, especially in your superiors. A vague or ambiguous comment can open you up to interpretations that you have not bargained for. Silence and saying less than necessary must be practiced with caution, then with the right situations. It is occasionally wiser to imitate the court jester, that's not hard, who plays the fool but knows he's smarter than the king. He talks and talks and entertains, and no one suspects that he is this more than a fool. Also, words can sometimes act as a smokescreen for any deception you might practice. By bending your listener's ear with talk, you can distract and mesmerize them. The more you talk, in fact, the less suspicious you become. See, John, that's you right there. That's what you're asking. The verbose are not perceived as sly and manipulative, but as helpless and unsophisticated. It's just the reverse of the silent policy employed by the powerful. By talking more and making yourself appear weaker and less intelligent than your mark, you can practice deception with greater ease.
I'm not sure if that makes me feel better or not, Tom. Sigh. Yeah, this is a short chapter, so I think we can actually keep this episode fairly short. But I think that we should all think about how we communicate what we say. I've heard it said that we should speak with brevity, meaning fewer words that have the most meaning.
Brevity is the soul of wit, is the saying.
Pardon? Oh.
Brevity is the soul of wit. Maybe I remember that because that's from kind of a radio maxim.
Was it on Breaking Bad?
No, it's just a saying that's been out there for a long time, and I guess maybe I've learned it in radio school. It was brevity is the soul of wit. So they're saying to keep it short and sweet.
So I think we should keep this short and sweet. Perhaps we'll make a record.
Well, we have let me touch on we have several little antidotes. Robert Greene fills his book with poems and all kinds of little things that stories in the side columns, and it makes it for a very interesting read. One of the things he was mentioning is oysters. This says oysters open completely when the moon is full, I guess, and when the crab sees one, it throws a piece of stone or seaweed into it, and oysters cannot close again, so the crab can come back for the meat later. And I guess such is the person who opens his mouth too much and thereby puts himself at the mercy of the listener. That was by Leonardo da Vinci. I probably butchered that a little bit because when I copied and pasted it, because it has fancy fonts in the book, sometimes it changes my words. So I'm looking at it and going, wait a second, this is not what I remember reading exactly. But that's the gist of it. Leonardo says that the clams or oysters open up because they're almost like a person that chats too much. The crab throws a rock in there and comes back later and eats the oyster. which I
I
didn't
think
know.
I've seen that in the work environment, whereas you're at a meeting, everyone is discussing different issues. Perhaps they're being very honest about how they feel about something that's going on, and nothing is necessarily said at that time. But a month down the road, and maybe even another group, it's brought back up during that meeting. Well, I seem to recall when we were talking about this, and you said blah, 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 blah. And once you say words, you cannot take them back. And some people have very selective memories.
I worked with a guy that he must have read this book. He was a real son of a bitch, and he let me in on one of his secrets. He had one of those pens. I don't know if they were popular a couple of years ago, where when you write, they record also. So they're doing an audio recording. But what it does is if you go back to your notes and you touch that exact note, that page, it gives you who was saying something at that moment. So he would use it when people tried to say things or bring things up in meetings where they said that they would go, oh, I never said that. And he goes, well, hold on. And he'd open up his book and he'd touch the note and it would come up with their voice saying exactly what they said they didn't say, which I thought was a little, shady. I think if you're recording someone, you should let them know that you're recording them. I think that's a little shady, but, he was just saying, hey, I'm taking notes and my pen does this. But he was a master at that trick.
Seems very effective.
Yeah.
Very effective.
He was a snake, though. You didn't know whether to grab him by the head or the tail.
Yeah. We'll just be silent on that one.
Hey, I didn't name him. I didn't call him out.
No, I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid that I'll open my mouth and I will name them.
Oh, gotcha. The keys to power, one of the keys here that Robert Greene gives according to Law 4, he says power in many ways is a game of appearance. And when you say less than necessary, you inevitably appear greater and more powerful than you are. Your silence will make other people uncomfortable. Humans are machines of interpretation and explanation. They have to know what you're thinking. When you are carefully control what you reveal, they cannot cut off your intentions or your meanings.
Yeah, when I read that, I have to think back about finance and how in years past you would see certain, power is about appearance, and you would see people that live in a huge house, drive a very expensive car, have a Rolex watch on their wrist, and they are flat broke. They have the appearance that they're very well to do, that they have lots of money, but the truth of the matter is that they're broke. And that would never ever just come up in conversation with those people. We are all left with that appearance, but it's not an accurate impression of them. So again, it goes beyond words. It also goes hand in hand with appearance, how you carry yourself, what you say, how you say it, and how often you sigh.
Yes, I have one more authority shout out that they call attention to in the book, and this is a quote from Han Fei Chu, which is a Chinese philosopher in the 3rd century BC. Yeah, and I love the way this guy talks. He says, "Never start moving your own lips and teeth." I like lips and teeth. That's pretty cool. Before the subordinates do. The longer I keep quiet, the sooner other moves their lips and teeth. As they move their lips and teeth, I can thereby understand their real intentions. If the sovereign is not mysterious, the ministers will find opportunity to take and take. So he lets the people do the speaking before he ever says anything.
Yes, and I think that a sign of power is not having to speak, letting the other people do the talking. In a conversation, that the person who does the less talking generally has the more power in the conversation, which makes you very powerful, Tom.
I have to agree. You know, it's a technique. I'll use that technique too when I go to troubleshoot something in one of my studios at my radio stations. You know, I always make sure I want them to explain everything. I remain quiet and I listen, and I want them to tell me what time it happened, when it happened, what's happening, how often does it happen, does it happen only to them, and I let them do the talking as I listen, because you know invariably sometimes you'll find out, it's like being a detective, you'll find out things. Oh well, this is it's always been that way, but you know, because sometimes they'll be like, hey, we have this new problem. Well, how long has this been going on? Well, it's always been that way. Well, you know, how come this is the first I'm hearing of it? You know, so I become somewhat of a dick, but you have to be sometimes.
You know, also when reading this chapter, I could not help but think of one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a bit crude, but it's funny as hell. The 40-Year-Old Virgin. And, you know, have you seen it?
No, I have not. I know it's Steve Carell, but I never have seen it.
Steve Carell is a 40-year-old virgin, and he goes through this process of trying to meet girls, and his friends are actually his coworkers who are not really friends. They're more like acquaintances, but they're trying to help him out in picking up girls. And one of the bits of advice that Steve Carell got was, you know, you have to be kind of aloof and don't just talk to the girl, but rather ask her questions and act like, I forget the name of the character in some book. You know, it was you know, it's hilarious. I always think of that. So he goes through this scene and he's talking to this girl, and everything that she says to him, he responds with a question. And you know, and he's like, yeah, you just kind of have to be like a dick. Act like a dick.
It's true. Sometimes it works. You know, it's unfortunate because I'm not that type of personality, but you know, my job has created me and made me into one. It's kind of like Israel. When you think about it, Israel's surrounded by a bunch of warring nations that just want their blood, and they've become a scrappy, you know, little country that just, you know, is seen by the world as probably, you know, arrogant or, you know, war driven or what have you, but it's you know, because of their circumstances, they have to protect themselves, and they've become very good at what they do.
Yes.
And that's not picking a side on the whole Middle East thing. I'm just bringing up a point.
Well, do we end this this episode with, you have to be a little bit of a dick?
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
I think so.
I don't know if it's a perfect way to end, but
I think the law number 4, always say less than necessary, and he forgot to put in be a dick.
So obviously we're covering all these laws, the 48 laws of power by Robert Greene. And you can check us out at our website, www.aswiftkickintheass.com. We also have a podcast, aswiftkickintheass.com. We'd love to hear from you. So
give us some ratings in iTunes if you like the podcast, like what you hear, and tell your friends. You know, it's I know this book has been around since the 90s. I think I picked it up in around 98 or 99 when it first came out, before anyone had really realized what it was, and it just keeps on reappearing, and every time I reread it, I've learned something new. So I thought this was a good thing for us to cover, and I think it's awesome.
So do I. Know that I'm learning a lot about this through this process of reading the book, listening to the audio, as well as taking notes on it. I think there's a lot to learn. I myself, if you know me, know that I can also be a dick. I think we all can be from time to time, but it's more than that. I mean, sometimes to be a better person, you have to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, or you need to do them a little bit differently. And I think this gives you a good framework to not only understand yourself a little bit better, but also understand how other people act and protect yourself against them.
That's what I was going to say. It's protection. It's just it's self-protection. It's like anything. It's like carrying a gun or learning a martial art. You need to learn how to deal with people and how to navigate, when you speak to them, and avoid being taken advantage of.
Yes. And I guess until next time, this is John Curran.
It's Tom Stewart. Thanks for listening.